My name is Rachel Hughes. I'm 35 years old and I live in a small house in Mountain View, California, the kind of place realtors call cozy because it sounds nicer than tight. But to me, it's perfect. Not because it's big, not because it's impressive, because it's ours. Every corner of this house carries proof that two exhausted adults once chose discipline over comfort, patience over impulse, and love over ego, again and again, until something stable finally existed. I live here with my boyfriend, Noah Carter, and our 10-year-old daughter, Aubrey. Noah is the steady kind of man, the kind who doesn't raise his voice when he's stressed. He just gets quieter, like he's making room for the world to calm down around him. He works in operations for a logistics company, and he has this habit of tightening jar lids for me without saying anything, like that's his love language. And Aubrey is the light in every room she enters. She has curious eyes, always asking why, always wanting to understand how things work, like the world is a puzzle she's determined to solve with both hands. People see my life and assume I came from a supportive family. They assume my parents were proud. They assume I grew up loved. And when they say things like, "Your mom and dad must be so happy you turned out like this," I usually smile politely and change the subject. Because the truth is, I haven't spoken to my family in a long time. And a year ago, I filed legal paperwork to keep them away from my daughter. I never imagined I'd be the kind of woman who needed a court order just to breathe in peace. But some families don't teach you love. They teach you survival. It all started resurfacing about a year and a half ago, on a quiet weekday night, just a week before Christmas. Noah and I had finished dinner. Aubrey was in the living room, sitting cross-legged on the rug, gluing colorful paper pieces together to make Christmas cards for her friends. I was in the kitchen making 2 cups of coffee, one for me, one for Noah, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I stared at it for a moment, annoyed. I almost ignored it. I was tired, and it was late enough that any call from a number I didn't recognize usually meant one thing: trouble. Still, I answered. "Hello?" There was a pause on the other end, a tiny inhale. Then a voice that froze my whole body like cold water. "Rachel?" I didn't have to ask who it was. I hadn't heard her in 13 years, but some voices don't disappear. They stay tucked in the back of your mind like a blade you once cut yourself on. "My mother," I whispered, more to myself than her. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. "Oh, thank God, it's really you." I felt my grip tighten around the phone. "How did you get my number?" A beat. "Grayson gave it to me." Of course he did. Grayson, my cousin, was the only person in that family who ever treated me like I existed. The only one I still kept a cautious connection with. He never pushed, never guilted, just checked on me from a distance, like he didn't want me to feel alone in the world. But hearing his name in my mother's mouth felt wrong, like someone wearing a ring they didn't earn. She tried small talk first. "How's work going? How's your little girl? How have you been?" The words sounded practiced, like she was reading from a script titled "How to Speak to the Daughter You Didn't Deserve." I cut her off. "Why are you calling me now?" Silence stretched. Then she said softly, "Christmas is next week. Your father and I are having a dinner at our house. The whole family will be there. We want to invite you, and Noah, and Aubrey." Her voice became careful, sweet. "It's been a long time since everyone was together. I hope you won't say no." And that's when something old and painful stirred behind my ribs. Not sadness, not nostalgia, something darker. Something that whispered, "They're doing it again." I swallowed hard. "You want me to come back?" I said slowly, "so you can crush me one more time like you did 13 years ago?" She sighed like I was being dramatic. "Oh, Rachel, you can't live in the past forever. That was just a small thing. We were going to make it up to you, but when we got home, you were already gone." My jaw clenched. "So now you're blaming me?" My voice rose despite me trying to keep it steady. "You forgot me, humiliated me, compared me like I was a defective product, and now it's a small thing?" She softened her tone like that made it better. "All right, I don't want to argue. Dinner starts at 6. I hope you'll come." And then she hung up. Just like that. No goodbye. No, I'm sorry. No space for my answer. I stared at my phone like it had insulted me. And then the memories came rushing in, fast and sharp, like someone kicked open a door I'd spent years holding shut. I was 20 the last Christmas I spent in that house. Sophomore in college. I came home for winter break with this stupid, fragile hope that maybe adulthood would make them see me differently. That year, my parents hosted relatives. The living room was loud, packed, warm. And as always, the attention orbited one person. My older sister, Serena. Serena was 4 years older than me. She was tall, charismatic, and she wore confidence like perfume. Back then, she'd already been working 2 years, and everyone spoke about her like she was a celebrity. Promotions, projects, big future. I remember sitting in a corner, barely touched by conversation, like I was furniture. No one asked about my classes. No one asked what I was building, what I was dreaming of, what I stayed up late studying. Only Grayson sat with me, 16 years old, awkward and sweet, listening to me ramble about tech and code like it mattered. Then came gift time. My family didn't usually do presents, but because there were guests, my parents prepared a few. They called Serena first. She opened a box and pulled out a dark brown leather watch in a velvet case. Everyone clapped. I didn't expect anything, but a tiny hope rose anyway. Then one by one, gifts disappeared into hands. And when the table was empty, I realized something. There was nothing left for me. I stood up, walked over to my parents, and I asked, why did everyone get a gift except me? My father looked awkward, like I'd asked him to solve a math problem. Then he said, we forgot. My mother didn't apologize. She just looked me up and down and said coldly, it's because you're not as outstanding as Serena. If you were like her, people would remember you. The room didn't defend me. It agreed with her. I remember nodding slowly, like my body was moving without me. I understand, I said. Then I went upstairs. And later that night, I packed a backpack. Clothes, laptop, a notebook, cash. Before I left, I placed a note on the dining table. If you no longer remember me as your daughter, then I have no reason to be your daughter anymore. And I walked out into the cold. 13 years later, I was standing in my kitchen again, coffee cups in my hands, that same old ache, now alive, like it had never left. Noah noticed my face immediately. Who was that? He asked quietly. I stared at him, then forced the words out. My mom. His expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened with concern. What did she want? A Christmas dinner, I said, almost laughing at how ridiculous it sounded. An invitation, like we're a normal family. Noah didn't tell me what to do. He never does. He just asked, what do you want? Before I could answer, Aubrey's voice floated in from the living room. Mom, who was on the phone? I walked out, set the coffee down, and saw her looking up at me with those wide, hopeful eyes. I hesitated. Then I said carefully, it was your grandma. Aubrey blinked. I have grandparents? The way she said it, like it was a surprise gift, made my chest tighten. Yes, I admitted, you do. Her face lit up instantly. That's awesome. Can I meet them? I'll make them a Christmas card too. I looked at Noah. He didn't nod or shake his head. He just watched me, quietly, like he knew this wasn't about dinner. It was about whether I would let my daughter step into the same room that once made me feel invisible. My throat burned. I crouched beside Aubrey and brushed her hair back. And against every instinct I had built to protect myself, I whispered, okay, we'll go. Aubrey squealed and threw her arms around my neck. And while she celebrated, I felt something colder settle in my stomach. Because deep down, I wasn't thinking about Christmas. I was thinking about the word my mother used so easily. Forgot. And I had a terrible feeling my daughter was about to learn what that word really meant in my family. Christmas Day arrived with that bright, polished California sunlight that always looks prettier than it feels. The air was cold enough to sting, but the streets were clean and quiet, like the entire world had agreed to hold its breath for one day. Aubrey was buzzing with excitement, clutching a handmade card she'd made the night before. It had glitter on it, way too much glitter, because she believed love should be obvious and messy and impossible to ignore. Noah drove while I stared out the passenger window, watching familiar streets blur past like a dream I didn't ask to revisit. You okay? Noah asked, his voice calm, careful. I swallowed. I'm fine, I lied automatically. He didn't push. He just reached over and squeezed my hand once, grounding me like he was silently reminding me. You can leave any time. When we pulled up to my parents' house, I noticed the gate was unlocked. That small detail shouldn't have meant anything, but it did, because my family always locked things they cared about. We arrived at 5 p.m., an hour earlier than my mother had told us. The driveway was empty. No cars. No welcome lights. For a second, I almost believed we were early enough to avoid the chaos. Early enough that maybe this could be gentle. Then we walked in, and the first thing I saw was the living room, frozen in time like a museum exhibit called The Past That Never Apologized. Same crooked family photo in the hallway. Same worn-out sofa with a small tear on the armrest. Same faint smell of old carpet and furniture polish. And sitting like he owned the place, Serena. My older sister looked comfortable, too comfortable. She leaned back in a chair with a beer in her hand, chatting with her husband like the world had never changed. Her two boys sat on the floor with iPads, volume loud, eyes glued to bright screens. She looked up when she saw me. Her expression didn't soften. It sharpened. "Well," she said, dragging the word out like it tasted strange, "you actually came." Noah's hand tightened around Aubrey's shoulder. Aubrey, sweet and brave, lifted her card slightly like a peace offering. "Hi," she said, small voice, polite smile. "I'm Aubrey." Serena glanced at her the way someone glances at a flyer being handed to them on the street. Then she looked back at me, like Aubrey was an accessory I'd brought for attention. Before I could respond, my mother stepped out from the kitchen. And for a second, I forgot how to breathe. She looked older. The lines on her face were deeper, her hair more gray than I remembered. But her eyes were the same. She looked at me and said, "I'm glad you came." Short, flat, like checking a box. Then she turned to Aubrey, forced a smile, and said loudly, theatrically, "I'm your grandmother." And she reached out and patted Aubrey's head. Not a hug, not a kneel down to meet her eyes. Just a pat. Like Aubrey was a neighbor's dog she didn't want jumping on her. Aubrey's smile faltered for just a second, but she recovered quickly because she's a child, because she doesn't know yet that adults can smile and still mean nothing. My mother disappeared back into the kitchen immediately afterward, like the greeting had drained her. I leaned toward Noah and whispered, "That felt wrong." Noah's jaw tightened. "Yeah." Serena smirked. Then, like she couldn't help herself, she tossed out the line that was half joke, half blade. "So, 13 years. You finally ready to stop being dramatic about that note you left?" I didn't answer. Because if I did, I'd either explode or cry, and I refused to gift her either. A few minutes later, my father walked in from the backyard. Noah greeted him politely, offered his hand. My father gave Noah a brief nod, like acknowledging a delivery driver. Then he walked past me, past Aubrey, without saying a word. Aubrey's fingers tightened around my coat sleeve. Her eyes flicked up to me, confused, and I felt that old, familiar humiliation creep up my spine like a shadow. I forced a smile down at her. "It's okay," I whispered. "He's just busy." But my stomach twisted because I knew that wasn't true. My father wasn't busy. He was making a statement. "You can come back, Rachel, but you don't get to matter." To distract Aubrey, I suggested we walk around the house. The three of us moved slowly from room to room while voices rose and fell behind us. In the hallway, I pointed out the bookshelf where I used to hide comic books. In the backyard, I showed her the old maple tree where there used to be a rope swing. Aubrey listened intently, holding my hand, her eyes wide, like she was trying to picture a younger version of me running through this place. Noah stayed quiet, scanning everything, watching people, like he was taking inventory of danger. And then, "Rachel!" Grayson's voice. Warm, familiar, real. I turned and saw him entering with his wife and their daughter Lily. Lily spotted Aubrey and squealed like she'd found treasure. "Aubrey!" The two girls collided in a hug so tight they almost fell over. Noah chuckled softly. I felt a sliver of relief. Grayson walked up to me and gave me a look that said 1,000 things without words. "I'm here. You're not alone." "Good thing it's not raining," he said lightly. "At least the kids can run around." I nodded, too tight in the throat to answer properly. For a moment, it almost felt normal. Almost. Then the rest of the family began arriving, one by one, like pieces of a chessboard being placed. Uncle Dean showed up with cookies. Aunt Harper came in complaining about traffic, holding fake flowers wrapped too tightly. And then Thomas arrived, another cousin, walking in like he was hosting the party. He glanced at me once, then leaned in to whisper something to his wife. I didn't hear the words, but I saw her mouth twitch into a smile. Noah's hand found mine again, squeezing once. By 6 o'clock, dinner began. About 20 people total. The air was polite but brittle, like everyone had agreed to behave, while still thinking ugly thoughts. Grayson sat next to me, quietly making sure I wasn't isolated. He poured my water, offered me different dishes, asked about work. Noah sat on my other side, protective but controlled. Aubrey and Lily sat close together, bending over sticker sheets like the adult tension didn't exist. And on the other side of the table, Serena, Thomas, my parents. Their corner of the table felt like a separate world, where their laughter was louder and their glances were sharper. Near the end of dinner, my mother clapped her hands and said with forced cheer, "All right, time for presents." The kids rushed into the living room, gathering on the floor like little magnets pulled toward joy. Aubrey tugged on my hand and whispered, "Mom, will I get one too?" My chest tightened. I crouched and smiled at her, smoothing her hair back. "Of course you will," I promised. And I meant it, because I had planned for this. I had prepared for this. I had refused to let my daughter experience the same humiliation I once swallowed alone. My mother started handing out gift bags. Serena's older son got a huge toy car. Her younger son got a remote-controlled building set. Thomas's boys got the newest Lego sets. Lily received a full art kit, every color, every brush. The kids cheered, ripping wrapping paper, laughter bouncing off the walls. 5 gifts, 5 names, 5 happy squeals. And then, nothing. My mother's hands were empty. The table behind her was empty. The space where Aubrey's gift should have been was empty. I saw Noah's expression change first. His eyes narrowed, his jaw locking. Grayson's wife stopped smiling. Even Lily froze, glancing at Aubrey with confusion. Aubrey sat very still, like she was waiting for someone to call her name. Then she looked up at me, and in her eyes I saw the beginning of a question she didn't know how to ask. I stood up. My voice came out calm, but it was the kind of calm that happens right before a storm breaks. "Where's Aubrey's gift?" My mother's face twitched, just slightly. "Caught." Then she forced a smile like she was performing. "Oh," she said brightly, like she'd just remembered milk at the store. "We forgot about her." The room went silent in the ugliest way. Not shocked silence. Not guilty silence. The kind of silence where people wait to see if you'll accept it. Aubrey's face crumpled. She didn't scream. She didn't throw a tantrum. She just burst into tears quietly, her little body trembling like she was trying to hold herself together and failing. Noah immediately moved toward her, but I got there first, wrapping my arms around her. "It's okay," I whispered, but my voice shook. "It's okay, baby." And that's when my father spoke up from his chair, cold as ever. "You disappear for 13 years and now you're demanding gifts." Serena leaned forward with a smirk. "Kids cry. They get over it. Don't tell me she's going to write a note and run away like you did." My hands tightened around Aubrey. My ears rang. I looked up and saw Thomas swirling wine in his glass, amused. "Relax," he said. "You've got enough money to pay bail if you hit someone." Then, worse, I heard kids whispering, not quietly enough. "She's crying because her family's too poor. Maybe she's not really family. That's why they forgot." The words hit me like a slap, and something inside me, something ancient, snapped awake. I turned toward the kids, my voice low but sharp enough to cut through the air. "Don't ever say that again." The room shifted. Adults stiffened. The kids went quiet. My eyes burned, but I didn't look away. "I won't forgive anyone who disrespects my daughter." Aubrey's sobs softened into hiccups, and then Lily stepped forward, holding a small toy she'd just unwrapped. She offered it to Aubrey with both hands. "Here," Lily said gently. "You can have this. Let's play together." My throat tightened, because suddenly I wasn't seeing Lily. I was seeing Grayson at 16, standing in my doorway, offering me his own gift, while the rest of my family pretended I didn't exist. History repeating itself. But this time, I wasn't the child. I was the mother. Aubrey wiped her eyes, sniffed, and looked up at me. I leaned down close to her face, making my voice soft, only for her. "What if Mommy has a surprise gift for you right now?" I asked. "Would that make you happy?" Her eyes widened instantly, like a switch flipped. "I knew you would," she whispered, hope rushing back into her face. I looked at Noah. He gave me a small nod, and then I looked at Grayson. He didn't nod. He didn't smile. He just watched me with quiet understanding, because he knew what I was about to do. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folded envelope. Inside were 6 printed tickets. I handed one to Aubrey first. She stared at the bold letters like she didn't trust them. Then she screamed so loudly the whole room flinched. "Disneyland? Mom!" She jumped up, arms around my waist, laughing through leftover tears. And in that moment, my heart broke and healed at the same time. Then I turned to Lily, who was still standing there with her toy, trying to make my daughter feel less alone. I handed Lily a ticket. "This one is for you," I said, "for being kind." Lily blinked. I get to go too?" "Yes," I said gently. "Of course you do." Then I stood up, and I held the remaining 4 tickets at eye level so everyone could see them. My voice wasn't loud, but it was steady. "I bought 6 Disneyland tickets for the 6 kids here," I said. "The trip was planned for March. I even hired 2 chaperones." Serena's eyes widened. Thomas straightened. My mother's smile faltered. I paused just long enough to let them taste the excitement, and then I finished. "But after what just happened," I said, looking directly at my mother, "I'm canceling the remaining 4 child tickets." The air froze. I continued, calm as a blade. "They'll be converted into adult passes. 2 of them are going to Grayson's family." I gestured toward him. "The other 2, Noah and I will keep." For a second, the room didn't even breathe. Then the kids started crying. Serena's boys, Thomas's boys, like the world had ended. Their mothers rushed to hush them, faces flushed with confusion and embarrassment. Serena shot up first, voice rising. "This isn't fair to my kids." I turned slowly, meeting her eyes. Did anyone stop to think about what was fair to my daughter? Thomas snapped. You can't do this in front of the kids. You're hurting them. Grayson stood up, calm but firm. Did anyone think about how Aubrey felt? He asked. Or is it always just about your kids? My father scoffed, leaning back. What are you all even arguing for? He said loudly. Where would Rachel get the money to buy 6 tickets? A trip like that would cost at least 15 grand. I didn't answer. Because I didn't have to. Grayson's voice sliced through the room. Then take out your phone, he said. Open Google. Type in Linkx Ton Systems. Go to the founder section. Serena's face shifted. Thomas frowned. Then Serena whispered to Thomas, voice tight. Linkx Ton, that sounds familiar. She grabbed her phone, fingers suddenly shaky. And one by one, the mouths that had mocked me went quiet. Because the truth doesn't need to argue. It just needs to be seen. And as they stared at their screens, I looked down at Aubrey, smiling now, clutching her ticket like it was proof she mattered. I thought the worst was over. I really did. But toxic families don't stop when they lose in the room. They just change the battlefield. And I didn't know yet that by morning, Serena would take this to the internet. The house was quiet the next morning. Not the peaceful kind of quiet that follows a holiday, but the fragile, uncertain silence that hangs in the air after something breaks and no one knows what comes next. Aubrey sat at the kitchen table eating cereal, humming softly to herself, Disneyland ticket folded and unfolded in her hands like it might disappear if she stopped touching it. Noah stood by the counter making coffee, his movements calm, measured. I was pretending to read my phone. Then Noah spoke. Rachel, he said gently, you might want to see this. I looked up. He was holding his phone out to me. On the screen was Reddit, the family drama section. And right there, pinned at the top, already gaining traction, was a post written by Serena. She didn't use her real name. She didn't tag me directly. But she didn't need to. The post started like this. My sister publicly humiliated my children at Christmas using money. She promised them a trip, then ripped it away in front of them. She's wealthy now and used that to divide the family and traumatize kids who did nothing wrong. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening with each sentence. She painted herself as calm, wounded. She painted me as cold, arrogant, cruel. She wrote about a power move, about emotional abuse, about how I weaponized wealth. She left out the part where my daughter was forgotten, left out the tears, left out the comments her kids made, left out my mother's voice saying, we forgot her like Aubrey was a spare chair. The post ended with a question that dripped with fake humility. Did I really deserve this? Or did my sister go too far? I felt something strange settle over me. Not rage, not panic, just exhaustion. Noah watched my face carefully. Do you want me to respond? He asked. I shook my head slowly. No, I said, not yet. Because something in me understood this wasn't about winning an argument. This was about whether the truth would survive being twisted. Before I could say anything else, my phone buzzed. A message from Grayson. Did you see Serena's post? I replied with one word. Yes. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, don't worry, we've got this. I frowned slightly, confused. Before I could ask what he meant, my phone refreshed. And then, there it was. A comment under Serena's post. Posted by Grayson's account. Attached to it was a video. The video. The one his wife had recorded during the gift moment. The caption was simple. This is the full recording of the Christmas gift exchange my cousin is referring to. Please watch before judging. I clicked play. The footage wasn't dramatic. It wasn't edited. It was raw and unfiltered. You could hear my mother saying, oh, we forgot about her. You could see Aubrey freeze. You could hear the whispers from the kids. You could see Noah's jaw clench. You could hear my voice, low, controlled, shaking just slightly, as I said, don't ever say that again. And then the tickets, the silence, the shift, the truth. The comment section changed in real time. People stopped reacting to Serena's words and started reacting to what they saw. Someone wrote, how do you forget one child and not the others? Another, that little girl's face broke my heart. Another, this isn't about money. This is about favoritism. Within an hour, Grayson posted a second comment. Calm, factual. He laid out exactly what happened. No insults, no emotion, just facts. By mid-morning, Serena's post was gone. Deleted. Vanished. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel victorious. I just sat at the table watching Aubrey color, realizing something quietly powerful. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it just stands still and lets lies collapse under their own weight. The days that followed were silent. No angry texts. No calls. No dramatic confrontations. It was like the entire family had collectively decided to pretend nothing happened, which was fine by me. March came sooner than expected. The Disneyland trip happened exactly as planned. Aubrey counted down the days, packing and unpacking her bag 3 times before we even left. She made a list of things she wanted to do. Hug Minnie, ride Space Mountain, eat triple scoop ice cream. Grayson's family came with us. Watching Aubrey and Lily race through the park together, laughing until their cheeks hurt, I felt something inside me finally unclench. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I wasn't trying to be seen. I just wanted my daughter to feel included, without fear, without apology. And she did. She glowed. But somewhere between fireworks and tired feet and sugar crashes, a thought kept whispering in the back of my mind. Toxic people don't disappear when they lose. They wait. And I was right. 3 months later, the first domino fell. Serena lost her job. The company conducted an internal investigation, embezzlement, nearly a year's worth. The next news came fast. My parents' house went up for urgent sale, 30% below market value. Loans, debt, shady investments taken out in their names. For Serena. Her marriage collapsed just as quickly. Divorce papers filed. Kids gone. And then one Saturday afternoon, as I pulled into my garage, Noah met me at the door. "Rachel," he said quietly. "Someone rang the gate." I already knew. When I checked the camera, there they were. My parents, standing outside my home, empty-handed, wrinkled coats, eyes hollow in a way I'd never seen before. And in that moment, I felt something strange. Not anger, not satisfaction, just a heavy, settled understanding. The past hadn't come back to apologize. It had come back to ask for help. And I knew. The hardest part was still ahead. I didn't open the gate. I didn't speak through the intercom. I just stood there for a moment, watching my parents through the security feed. 2 figures who once towered over my childhood, now reduced to silhouettes at my doorstep. Noah stood beside me, silent but alert. "Aubrey's in her room," he said quietly. Door closed. I nodded. Good. She didn't need to see this. I stepped outside alone, closing the door carefully behind me. The gate buzzed as I unlocked it, opening just enough for conversation, not invitation. My mother looked up first. Her eyes filled instantly, like she'd rehearsed this moment. "Rachel," she said, voice trembling. "We didn't know where else to go." My father stood slightly behind her, shoulders hunched, hands shoved into his coat pockets. He didn't meet my eyes. I waited. Silence stretched. They expected me to fill it. I didn't. Finally, my mother continued, words tumbling out. "Things have fallen apart. The house, the loans, Serena." I lifted a hand. "Stop!" She froze. I took a breath, keeping my voice even. "You don't get to summarize 13 years in one sentence." Her mouth opened, closed. I studied their faces. The wrinkles, the exhaustion, the fear. They looked older than I remembered. Smaller. And for one fleeting second, I felt something like pity. Then I remembered Aubrey's tears. "I'm not here to argue," my father muttered finally. "We just need help." The words landed heavy. Need help. I looked at him, really looked at him. This was the man who walked past my daughter without a word. This was the man who questioned where I got the money to protect her joy. "I can't help you," I said calmly. My mother flinched. "Rachel, please, we're your parents." I nodded once. "Yes, you are." Then I turned, walked back inside, and printed a single sheet of paper. When I returned, I handed it to them through the gate. It was the phone number and address of a local temporary shelter and legal aid center, one that helped people in financial crisis. "This is all I can offer," I said. My mother stared at the paper like it was an insult. "You'd send us there?" she whispered. I met her eyes. "You sent me away with nothing," I replied. "This is more than I got." My father finally looked up then. There was anger in his eyes, but also shame. They didn't argue. They didn't apologize. They just turned and walked away. And as the gate closed behind them, I realized something painful and true. They hadn't come back because they loved me. They came back because Serena was gone, and I was the only option left. A few days later, my phone rang. "Unknown number," I answered. It was Uncle Dean. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "Rachel," he said, voice tight, "they've hit rock bottom. Do you really have to be this harsh?" I leaned against the counter, staring at the wall. "Were you at the Christmas dinner 13 years ago?" I asked calmly. Silence. "And were you at the most recent one?" I continued. Another pause. "I'm sure you heard everything then," I said. "You heard how my mother forgot her granddaughter. You heard how my father spoke to us. You heard how Serena and Thomas stood there and said nothing." He sighed. "They're still family." I exhaled slowly. "If you care that much," I said, "then take them in. Give them a place to stay." He didn't respond. I continued, voice steady. "Since the day I walked out of that house, not one of you checked on me. Not one. So you don't get to tell me what I owe them." There was a long silence. Then I said one last thing, quiet, final. "I don't hate them, but I don't owe them." I ended the call. That night I didn't sleep. Not because I felt guilty, but because I felt alert. Like prey that knows danger doesn't always announce itself loudly. They had shown up once. That meant they could show up again. And next time it might be when I wasn't home, or when Aubrey was walking back from school. Fear crept in, not wild panic, but focused concern, the kind that sharpens your instincts. So I called a lawyer, not to sue, not to retaliate, to protect. A week later, the paperwork was finalized, a restraining order against my parents and Serena. They were legally prohibited from coming near my home, Aubrey's school, or my workplace. If they violated it, the police would step in immediately. When the lawyer slid the documents across the table, he didn't ask why. He just said, "Got it. We'll make sure your daughter is safe." And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Relief. Because peace doesn't come from reconciliation with people who refuse to change. It comes from boundaries that finally hold. After the restraining order was filed, life didn't magically become lighter, but it became quieter. No surprise calls, no relatives just checking in, no guilt disguised as concern. And for the first time since I was 20, that silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Aubrey never knew about the gate bell that afternoon. She never saw my parents standing outside our home like strangers asking for directions, and I was determined to keep it that way. Children deserve roots, not ghosts. One evening, about a week after everything was finalized, Noah and I sat on the couch while Aubrey colored on the floor. She was drawing Disneyland again, this time adding fireworks and mini ears to everyone. Noah watched her quietly for a long moment. "You did the right thing," he said. I nodded, but my chest still felt tight. "I keep wondering," I admitted, "if I waited too long, if I already exposed her to too much." Noah shook his head. "You didn't fail her," he said firmly. "You showed her that when someone hurts you, you don't shrink. You protect yourself." I swallowed, because that was the lesson I never learned as a child. Weeks passed. Then months. The family stayed away, legally and emotionally. I heard bits and pieces through Grayson. Nothing dramatic, just quiet consequences. My parents moved between temporary places. Serena's legal issues dragged on. The house was sold. Assets disappeared. No one reached out again. And slowly, I understood something that had taken me half my life to accept. Some people only remember you when they need you. That doesn't make you obligated. It makes you informed. One afternoon, Uncle Dean tried calling again. I let it ring. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel vindictive. I just didn't answer. Because closure doesn't always come with a speech. Sometimes it comes with a boundary that no longer requires explanation. A few months later, Aubrey came home from school and announced proudly that she had written an essay titled My Family. I felt my stomach tense. "What did you write?" I asked carefully. She shrugged, smiling. "That my family is Mom, Dad, and me, and Lily, and Uncle Grayson, and people who make you feel safe." I blinked hard and hugged her tighter than usual. That night, after she fell asleep, I stood in her doorway for a long time, listening to her breathe. I thought about the girl I used to be, standing in a room full of relatives wondering what was wrong with her because no one remembered her name. I wished I could go back and tell her this. You're not forgettable. You were just surrounded by people who only loved reflections of themselves. I used to believe that if enough time passed, people would change. That distance would soften cruelty. That blood meant permanence. I was wrong. Some people don't grow. They just wait for opportunities. And when you give them access again, they don't see a second chance. They see an opening. I went back to that house because I wanted my daughter to understand what family could be. But they showed her exactly what it should never be. Not once. Twice. And that was enough. So here's what I've learned. If you're listening to this and it feels familiar, if you walked away from a toxic environment, don't return just because time passed. Don't mistake silence for change. And don't let your child stand in the same place that once broke you. If you must choose between keeping peace with people who hurt you or protecting peace in your home, choose your home. Because family should never be a place where love has conditions. Family is where you're remembered without asking, where your child never has to wonder if they belong. And if you're still here with me, I want to ask you something. Was I wrong for canceling those 4 Disneyland tickets in front of Serena's kids? I know they weren't at fault, but has anyone ever stopped to think about how my daughter felt, standing there, forgotten, in a room full of people who claim to be family? Tell me what you think in the comments. And if this story made you reflect on boundaries, on parenthood, or on protecting the ones you love, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for staying with me until the very end.